Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, here with my co-host, Chris, Yosemite Sam himself, McNulty.
What?
Yosemite Sam. It'll make sense, I think, once we get the acronym out of the way.
Sure. Let's see how that goes. So today we'll be hearing from Sesha Mani, who is a Principal Group Product Manager at Microsoft here, focused on security and compliance in SharePoint, OneDrive, and beyond. We've worked with him a lot across the broad spectrum of Syntex. He's just been a great colleague for us to work with over the years, and we're glad we're able to share that with you here on today's show.
Yeah, we grabbed time with Sesha to talk about SAM. See, there's the acronym. And I just have to say, I love Yosemite as a place to hike and, of course, the character of the past. So I think it all makes sense. Anyway, I'm going to push on. That is the acronym, and it stands for SharePoint Advanced Management. And it's all the benefits that it brings for SharePoint admins. And with Sesha, we covered a lot of the benefits. We mapped it to what it is when you have the core elements without SAM, and then what SAM brings. And of course, expanding into the broader principles of how you can secure and manage your content and data at scale in Microsoft 365.
It's interesting. We use the word at scale a lot, and it's probably important to break down what we mean by that. When we look at those, some of those eye-popping numbers of 2 billion docs a day plus flowing into M365, and the size of so many of our customers' estates as they've moved beyond just using M365 for file collaboration, they're moving into more transactional details. The scale of what they have, the number of sites that they have is really mind-boggling. And the more mission-critical content people are putting in Microsoft 365 in those complex environments, one, the more critical is to make sure that access control is being properly governed. And second, it's much more likely that it's not being properly governed because it's sort of the reverse of security by obscurity. Because there are so many ways that people can find content these days, it's much more likely that if you have 100, 200,000, 500,000 sites in your organization, that there may be people using files and content in a way where there is no direct personal interaction, I think, with that person, between those folks and kind of the role that IT traditionally plays. And so looking at all of those needs to govern information at scale is really kind of at the heart of what we've brought out as SAM.
One of the tip of the spear phrases that I've heard, and I certainly am not the forefront of this area, but I've been around, how people used to talk about SharePoint admin on-prem and moving to the cloud. And there's always this notion, people ask, help me with my SharePoint sprawl. And these days, sometimes they're asking it in a similar way, help me with my team sprawl, meaning a lot of things get created oftentimes and usually for the right reasons. But at some point in time, I need to make sure that we aren't spread too thin or things that, that shouldn't be happening, to better manage what's happening on those sites. And right next to that is help me, with guests, people external, both to enable it, because I think that's been one challenge where we had the skew in the past for extranets, but still with the capability as people use it, they want it, but they want to be able to use it right. And back to that word at scale, to use it right at scale so that anybody can use it, but then use it within reason based on policies or at least visibility so that they can have better control of it. Is there anything when you think of what is now available for SAM or from SAM that would have just been really hard in the past, especially, with your consultant hat of the past?
I wouldn't say it was really hard. I would say it was more impossible. If you think about traditional SharePoint, whether it's on premises or the earliest days of the cloud, the center of everything was that site settings, or running things at site collection level more appropriately. Central admin, even on premises, was not a place where I went to configure the broad majority of security settings and access settings. That all gets governed down at the individual level. And there were some things like you could centralize that access control link of who gets, to bring all of those access control requests to a common email address. but it was pretty atomic. And so the expectation is you have a site, you're going to manage your site, you're going to manage your permissions, and so on and so forth. That's great if you have an active site owner. And it's great if you're in IT and you have a small number of sites. But you get, again, to that scale and the fact that so much of the calibration would require going into each one of 100,000 separate site collection settings and looking at what groups are defined there, who has access, what's the usage policy. It just doesn't happen. And so in the same way we've seen some of the other information management regimes that run kind of at a much grander level, when you're looking at things like records management, being able to look across the totality of your environment with records management policy. The same thing I think is really important to now that we have, we like to say we have cloud power, we have cloud scale, we've kind of delivered that on the user side. We need to sort of play catch up and make sure we're doing that on the IT admin side as well.
And that part of catching up feels like somewhat in the distant past, but also with some of the things that SAM does. People might have said, well, I can only do that on-prem, or I remember back in the day, it was a lot easier for me to have the right management access to control the environment in the way that I wanted. And I think what SAM really represents is just a next big milestone to be able to have fewer people say, I can't do what I need to do for SharePoint and certainly other related tech that relies on the SharePoint environment. I can't do that in the cloud. And that's a really hard statement to say these days, both for end users, IT developers. The cloud has matured to the point where, you're not moving to the cloud so you can have less control and less management capabilities. But with SAM, and again, I will say over the many years, a lot of the incremental improvements to the SharePoint admin experience has brought it to the level that you can do what you want and expect. And also now some delighter features that I think are really enabled only in the cloud, or in the cloud, they're made much more less complex and more simple to accomplish.
Yeah, I know Sesha's going to walk through some of the most common scenarios, but just realize that organizations have grown in the ways that, as we've gotten to what our CEO likes to talk about, cloud intensity, it also means bringing a different set of stakeholders into, quote unquote, your environment, whether they're customers or partners or vendors. We've made it very easy for you to extend SharePoint, extend Teams to being able to bring in these external constituents. And there can be some unintended consequences of doing that. And how can you make sure that you've got confidence that when I'm, working in one channel or one site with one external user, that I'm not inadvertently exposing information to other people at the same organization? And knowing that those tools are out there and available really helps an organization set kind of what the right policy should be in the first place. Anyway, that's kind of my take on how we got to where we are with SAM.
And I think with one last intended consequence of learning, we will now turn to talk with Sesha Mani to learn all about not only what is the SAM acronym, but what is the value to the SharePoint administrator.
So today on the Interzone, I am greatly pleased to welcome our colleague Sesha Mani, who is one of our principal GPMs from the OneDrive and SharePoint team. And amongst all of the different initiatives that he's been working on, is the product leader for what we're calling SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM. So Sesha, welcome to the Interzone.
Thank you, Chris. It is my pleasure to be back again here talking with you and Mark.
We know we have a very devoted audience who listens to most of our episodes, but in the event that someone may not recall from your last appearance on the Interzone, could you tell our audience a little bit about you, like what you do at Microsoft, how you got here in the first place?
Absolutely. I would love to, Chris. I've been with Microsoft for over 15 years now. Before that, I was part of 2 startups back in Vancouver, Canada. And one of my colleagues, Stuart Kwan, saw me and our startup's products, and he really wanted me to join Microsoft and start helping here. And that's where my journey started in Microsoft back in 2008. And since then, I was there for a few years, moved on to Office 365 SharePoint team, been with the team for over a decade now, since For some of you, I all know that SharePoint on-premises 2010. So I've been in the team since then. Currently, my team leads all of administrative experiences for SharePoint, as well as security, compliance, and some of the syntax values as well.
So on the admin side of things, we wanted to take a second to congratulate you and your team and everybody behind the moment that we're at now, which is to congratulate you on reaching general availability of the SAM product. So first, congratulations. That's a great milestone. In terms of what is that? There is a new level of SharePoint management that you've now put out there. We've referred to it already as SAM, which is SharePoint Advanced Management, which by its longer name is the Microsoft Syntex SharePoint Advanced Management add-on for anybody that's tracking the SKU name. Before we get too far, can you give us the 101 of what SAM is?
Absolutely, Mark. So we have, as you all know, SharePoint Admin Center experiences, which provides you with basic management capabilities, such as you can create sites, you can manage the active sites in your organization. Perhaps you can even have sharing controls, whether you want external sharing for your sites or not, and other basic capabilities. But as the digital content for customers increases, especially exponentially as the customers go through their digital transformation, there is now need for advanced management capabilities. I'll give you a canonical example. Sharing now turned into an oversharing problem as well, because people tend to accidentally or intentionally share broadly just to get access to everybody. With SharePoint Advanced Management, in short for SAM, we are looking at problems like that and then providing you with advanced capabilities so that from the get-go in the SharePoint Admin Center, which is very familiar to you, now you will be able to manage these advanced day-to-day problems that you may run into. So that's the 101 on SAM.
So, Sesha, that's a helpful introduction. We've been internally, looking and working at SAM for a while, and I know that I have an understanding of it, but for a lot of our audience, this may be the first time they're hearing about this. And so help us all understand a little bit. Microsoft 365 is already, a safe and secure platform, and we have tools and controls to let people manage their access. What problems are we solving with SAM that kind of go over and above what people are accustomed to working with kind of baseline SharePoint and M365?
Great question, Chris. I'll put them into three major problem pivots where the SAM is helping customers with. The first one is around oversharing. The second one is around sprawl of SharePoint sites. And then finally, the lifecycle of the content in your tenancy. So I'll briefly talk about each of one of those. Let's start with oversharing. So as you all know, you're absolutely right, Chris. We have basic sharing controls already in the product that customers can use. However, when it comes to users, accidentally or intentionally share broadly, or as a SharePoint site being there for many years, it's natural organically. Now many users are having access to that particular site, be it files in OneDrive sites or in SharePoint sites, right? So to address that problem, first you got to identify what are the sites that are overshared, which is a very complex problem, especially if you have a Microsoft 365 tenancy that has over, let's say, 500,000 SharePoint sites in them, right? Now with SAM, we are now able to provide you a simple way to scan through all your SharePoint sites and OneDrive sites and tell you which ones are overshared. Now, if you move to the second problem, for example, sprawl of SharePoint sites, the first thing is, how do I decide, how do I ensure that the right set of SharePoint sites are getting created? And it's not just organically the number of sites are growing, especially with every team gets created. As you all know, behind the scene, there is a SharePoint site now is getting created. So with the SAM control capabilities, you can now take an advantage of what are all the actual active sites and which ones are inactive, and then being able to take actions on them. And then finally, the third problem that is really around the life cycle of these sites. As you all know, as a SharePoint site, you start with few users meant for a small team collaboration. It becomes an active site and in the active state for, let's say, a few years. But after the project is complete, usually people move on to the next project, and then that site is left behind, and then it becomes an inactive site. Or you wanted to make sure that people are not having standing access to those kind of inactive sites. So then the life cycle needs to be taken care, and that's where SAM provides you some capabilities to identify these inactive sites and even active sites with necessary users who have content, who have access to them, and then being able to take actions on them. So just to summarize, oversharing, sprawl of SharePoint sites, and the life cycle of sites are the three key problems that SAM helps you to address.
Yeah, and I think it's probably relevant. I know we keep saying this loudly and frequently, but our customers are adding well over 2 billion net new documents a day to M365. If you have a mental map that is going back to, you're talking about, the earlier days of SharePoint on premises as this kind of work group file repository. If you have, a couple of dozen people and a couple of hundred files, I think people have a good mental map of what you're doing and how you're doing it. But as we've seen kind of this, the whoosh of cloud intensity and the sheer volume of what many customers' digital estate looks like, with move to cloud, moves to support remote and hybrid work, and with Teams driving, more and more content coming in, and Power Plat and all the rest, it's just absolutely massive. And it's something I know that our customers have been clamoring to get more assistance with.
I wanted to help visualize for, IT folks that are looking at SAM and thinking, is this something that we could benefit from? So the SharePoint Advanced Management capabilities lie within the SharePoint Admin Center in Microsoft 365. And if there are people that have been managing SharePoint in the cloud for a while, they know what that looks like, the design of it, capabilities, and how they go about doing specific tasks and accomplishing what it is they need to do. When people invest in SAM, can you talk about what does the admin center look like? And again, maybe some of the tactical, do this so that I can accomplish that. What then becomes available to IT with SAM in the SharePoint Admin Center?
Great question, Mark. The moment you have enabled our SAM SKU, as you rightly put, it's called Microsoft Syntex SharePoint Advanced Management Plan 1. That's the SKU name that you would see in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. The moment you have enabled that capability in the SharePoint Admin Center on the left now, you will see an Advanced Management as an option that's available for you. And when you select that, it's going to list out all the controls that are now available for you to manage in your tenancy across the three problem set that I mentioned: oversharing, sprawl of sites, and content lifecycle. So in that particular feature list, then you can choose, let's take an example. One of the feature is called Data Access Governance. We call it DAG Insights. And when you select that feature, it will take you to the DAG dashboard, wherein you can now select specific reports to create. So for example, you can create a sharing report as part of that. So you can go through that detail within the DAG experience. And once you selected a specific sharing links, let's say anonymous link or company shareable link that you want the report for, then it will generate the report by scanning through all the SharePoint sites in your tenancy, and then coming back with a report that shows you here are the top 100 overshared sites for that particular company shareable link is the report. And then from there, you can take further actions. For specific sites, you may want to now restrict access because those sites are not meant to be having so many company shareable links. So that's how you navigate step by step, starting from the advanced management tab, going into specific feature sets. And then within that feature set, you can now take advantage of all the further capabilities there. We made it so simple, Mark, that it's really intuitive. Within that SharePoint Admin Center, you can navigate and take advantage of all these same capabilities with just few clicks. Just be mindful, as you can imagine, when you create or when you have started creating a report, it does take some time to come back depending on how many sites you have in your tenancy. So it may vary from just few minutes to up to 24 hours, depending on millions and millions of sites you may have in your tenancy.
I think it's one of the things that I bet all three of us here oftentimes when we go to talk with a customer, we have an executive briefing center, and we often talk about what's coming in the future and some things that they should definitely have on their radar. But we also are reactive in taking questions and talking through different problems if we have solutions or can point them in the right direction for what they already have. And I think one of the most common things that I know I've heard that this directly applies to is help me with my SharePoint sprawl. You had mentioned Teams, of course, is helping with that sprawl. And putting any governance plan in place, of course, helps. Putting any lifecycle management in the context of when I create a site, how then do I notify? Do you still need this site? Can we delete this site? And optimizing that. But to do that at scale, especially when there's a lot of sites and content already out there, it's been really a breath of fresh air to be able to say concretely, yeah, we've got a great offering for you. It's called the SharePoint Advanced Management offering. Here's what it does and how it works. And it just puts a little bit less of an onus of go build something so you can manage this environment. And it's more of to leverage this, which was built for it and is a little bit more off the shelf.
Absolutely, Mark. And actually, to add on to that, we have been working with a couple of large organizations who used to have custom scripts, which takes time to write, as well as to maintain it for many years in order to identify simply what are the SharePoints that are inactive. When they hear this opportunity that, wow, inactive sites policy right there, available in SAM, as part of the SAM offering, and with just few clicks, now, within a few hours, I now got the list of inactive sites in my tenancy, just like that. They loved it. They love deploying these kind of capabilities. And more importantly, like you said, you can also take actions on these inactive sites, including you can notify the site owners and have them confirm whether they still want that site or not. Now, this is another important aspect of SAM. Every policy and the insights that we have built in, we ensure that it is not just the SharePoint admins problem. It is always a collaborative effort between the SharePoint admins and the site owners. That's why we built this notification mechanisms going into the site owners, and then in some cases doing the site access review. And then the site owner comes back and say, yes, all the permissions that are there is correct, or this site, I still need it, so let it be. That interaction also, we have now created as part of this offering.
Yeah, Mark, we're still in early days with SAM, just having released it this year. So we'll have some public case studies to share in the not too distant future. But what we can say is, one of our earlier customers is a large consumer-facing retailer. And if you kind of think about the nature of a retailer, they have lots of operational activities that kind of spill over well beyond retail. They have suppliers, they have partners, they have vendors, they have employees. And so you're just the ordinary course of doing business. You're going to generate a fairly large data estate to a scale that the folks who may be working with one supplier may not even know all the other people who have access to that supplier's content, and that supplier may have access to that content. But how do you kind of shape and govern that information access and lifecycle when some of the players may be outside of your traditional organization? I don't know, Sesha, if you want to share some of the feedback that we've gotten from working with these customers.
Absolutely. I would love to share that. I think, Chris, you nailed it. Collaborating with external partners and suppliers, and then managing their permissions and throughout the lifecycle within the SharePoint sites is the fundamental, right, to many, many organizations for their business success. It's not only about bringing them into your tenancy and providing them access to a SharePoint site, but also ensuring that you're bringing them only to the right set of SharePoint sites. And then second of all, continuously monitor and ensure that only the right set of external users are coming in. And that is where the data access governance sharing report is of super valuable. And then third of all, like you mentioned earlier, every supplier relationship, potentially you probably have a sponsor within your organization, especially for larger corporations, right? And that sponsor is the responsible person to ensure that the life cycle of those external users' access for a given project is taken care. And that's where the site access review that I mentioned is important. And many customers have given us really good feedback on how that site access review and the fact that sponsors are being involved in this process of end-to-end external users control is so much valuable. And of course, they also given us feedback to work on more things in this space. So for example, some customers gave us feedback to also, I would love to know simply what are the SharePoint sites that are shared with. We have this concept called everyone except external users. For short, we call it EEU group. And what it does is when you share with that particular group, potentially that particular site is now open to all the employees in your organization, which many people do that because they just want to get out of, okay, I don't want to permission everybody. I'll just give permission to all of them in my organization, right? Now we are coming up with a new report based on that customer feedback. We're going to come up with a new report as part of the DAG Insights. It's called EEU report, so that it tells you, here are all the SharePoint sites that are permissioned for that EEU group, which is everyone except external users group. And we're going to expand that more by introducing many other capabilities, such as you can provide us a custom security group that you may already have in your organization, and then give you that capability as well. So those are some of the feedback we got from customers that we are also addressing as part of our SAM upcoming releases as well.
I love the idea of the EEE. It's one of those where I have on a couple of sites over the years have stood up a site, and then when I get ready to roll it out to the rest of Microsoft, mostly for field sellers to get with the most recent SharePoint information, we have a site that people can come and it is one of those security groups or user groups that I'm always excited to put on, because that means I'm at the end of being able to let people know where all the good content is. But I also know I'm using a big access control, which is then going to open up my site to everybody at Microsoft. So it's a good and a little scary. But I'm also glad that those that work for Microsoft IT can then keep me within their own governance and keep me grounded by not doing too many things too crazily. And I thought that would be where we could wrap up is just to help understand there's a kind of a left to right maturity model when you think about managing and governing SharePoint, and of course, plus because of all the things that are powered by SharePoint with Teams and some of the Viva apps and whatnot. But if you can just help us understand, there's the basic notion of the SharePoint admin capabilities. There are, of course, all of the advanced management capabilities that SAM brings in. And then even beyond that, there's additional security and compliance measures that people can review and take advantage of. And if that's kind of a left to right, simple, then to advanced, then to additional capabilities with security and compliance, how would you talk a customer through in what is it that they need and maybe some of the reasons why they need maybe a little bit more when they need more?
As I said earlier, the simple security and compliance capabilities and governance capabilities are already available as part of the basic offering in the Microsoft 365. And I mentioned about some of the advanced problems that customers are now starting to see, especially as their digital estate is growing exponentially, like oversharing, sprawl, and corner lifecycle. Not only that, going into your additional bucket of maturity, where especially as every team that you create behind the scene, it creates a SharePoint site. And one of the requirements we got from customers is, hey, Sesha, I really wanted to block the download of Teams meeting recordings, which, as you all know, are stored back in the corresponding user's OneDrive, or in the group case, it is stored in the corresponding SharePoint site. And for us to enable such a capability, meaning we have to block the download of files, we got to create that foundational advanced capability, which is block download policy for files from SharePoint and OneDrive. And that's exactly what we did, which is part of the SAM offer now, which is you can now block download of any files from SharePoint sites and OneDrive. Now, this is where we're also helping or amplifying the team's governance as well, which is not only any files, you can even be very specific and say, I want to block download of Teams meeting recording files from SharePoint and OneDrive. You can now do that. That's one of the policy now we have enabled as part of this SAM offering as well. So it helps not only just within the SharePoint set specific problems, but also the other application that took dependency on SharePoint and now building and taking advantage of these governance policies as well. The another example policy I would call out, which is also I'd put them in the additional bucket of policies available in SAM, is what we call the restricted access control policy. And this allows you to say, let's say you have a SharePoint site, perhaps it is connected to the team, and the team is open to many users. So it's okay, they're all chatting within the context of the team. But when it comes to the files access, perhaps you do want to restrict to a specific small group of site users. And you can do that now with this restricted access control policy. Simply set the policy for a given SharePoint sites on here is a security group that the members are allowed to access these files in the SharePoint site, nothing else. And you can do that as well. So that way, that's an advanced use case where I do want to allow users to communicate in chat and so on. But when it comes to the content, I want to restrict who can access. And you can use this policy to do that as well. So there are additional capabilities, security policy capabilities are part of the SAM that customers can take advantage of.
I just think there's so many choices that people have now when they think of if they're just getting started with moving some of their SharePoint workload to the cloud, or they're taking further advantage of Teams, and even to that extent, this great use of Teams, sometimes at the point where you don't need the team or the content within, or restricting certain actions that people can take, help to keep within whatever governance guidelines that they've built out for themselves. But the last thought I had just in hearing that maturity model and some of the additional capabilities is, I can't even imagine when we first stood up SharePoint Online, many, many years ago, one of the first gripes, and I think it was an accurate one, was I'm losing control of how I can manage my SharePoint environment. And that might be true for some of the things that now people are really glad they don't have to do with managing the physical hardware and the uptime and the security aspects, but that they still have their unique use cases and things that they want to do when there's a certain threshold of information policy based on who should be able to see it, access, and then, of course, the lifecycle of it. We're so far ahead of where we started. And it's really great to get to this level where people, I think a lot of our customers are going to like that they now have a choice versus I can only do this, outside or on-prem. So it's really great to see the progress over many, many years. And with this last, the SAM release, it really takes it up to another level.
Just get your thoughts on when you think about not just, we talked earlier about baseline platform capabilities, but Purview provides a lot of tools for governing and securing M365. Like, how do you distinguish, what's the role of Purview and what's the role of SAM?
Yeah, great question, Chris. I also get this question a lot. The way that I would encourage you to think about is that Purview is, like you mentioned, Chris, is about for compliance-specific policies. And it is actually targeted for, as you all know, the compliance admin persona. Whereas for the SAM, SharePoint Advanced Management is primarily targeted for the SharePoint admins. And the policies that I talked about, like a block download policy, for example, or even restricted access policy, the data access governance related insights, they are all targeted specifically for the content management admins. In other words, SharePoint admins. So that's how we have designed it, and we are thinking about this SharePoint Advanced Management capabilities. Now, SAM complements Purview as well. For example, there are capabilities, as you all know, sensitivity labels as part of the Purview offering. And we do have complementary functionalities in SAM that helps you to elevate your story of overall SharePoint site lifecycle management as you integrate these capabilities together and then achieve the best possible. So that's the way I would phrase it here, Chris. Hopefully that clarifies your question too.
Absolutely.
So my last question to you, Sesha, which is always maybe a tricky one for any product leader out there. What's next? Is there anything that you can tease out that maybe is already out there and we can put a little pin on it here, or anything you want to talk about futures of SAM?
No, absolutely. Great question, Mark. And this is one area, advanced management for SharePoint admins is something that we are fully committed. And there are many product roadmap items on the horizon. And let me share with you a few that are coming up in the next, I would say, 6+ months. So in the lens of oversharing, I already mentioned to you that the WU report, everyone except external users group support report is coming up. And then also we are looking to ensure that the site access review notification and the whole end-to-end is coming together as well as part of the DAG report. And then in the lens of sprawl and sites lifecycle management, two things I wanted to share. One is we are not only inactive sites policy, we're also planning to look at what we call site attestation policy, right? Even the site is active. Do you still need it, Mark? Like, that is the question many of the SharePoint admins have given a feedback for us. So we are thinking about that. Plus, the second one is what we call ownerless site policy. Even though the site is there, it is active, but the site owner, perhaps they left the company and now site becomes ownerless, right? So we want to identify sites like that and then take actions and inform the admins, here are the ownerless sites, and then the admin can choose to take some actions on them as well. So just to give you some teaser, those are some of the upcoming policies in product items in the oversharing and sprawl. In the lens of policy, one other interesting one that I'm really excited about personally is restricting the application access to sites. So like we talked about RAG policy, restricting access control to a given list of users, now you will be able to also restrict the given list of apps to your particular SharePoint site as well. So those are some of the ones I wanted to tease you with, and stay tuned for more updates.
That sounds good. I can tell that the entire product is grounded in what customers have been wanting to do, and that it's also based on feedback with the initial rollout, which is a significant rollout. SAM is not a small offering that then builds on, well, okay, people are still asking us to do more. So it's great to have a healthy roadmap, and I appreciate you sharing.
My pleasure, Mark.
Because I know both of you have put out a number of different materials, and I just wanted to highlight two for our audience to be able to go consume pretty quickly. And also the second one is just a great place to start to learn more about what Sesha was sharing about SAM. The first one was the general availability blog, which is aka.ms/syntex/SAM blog, SAMBLOG. And then there is the SAM learning page that is accessible from aka.ms/learnsam. Thank you to both, and of course lots of people behind making great documentation, of course great announcements, and great visibility into what it is, and then of course how to take advantage of it. But Sesha, thank you for your time today sharing more about SAM. And again, big kudos to you and the team for reaching the GA milestone.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mark and Chris, for having me here. It was always a pleasure to talk to you both of you. And also, we are continuing this journey. There's more coming up as we gear up towards our Ignite conferences. So stay tuned for more updates around SAM as well. Thank you all.
Up next on the Intrazone, it's events. Time for us to talk through significant events going on in the community. We've been saying for months and months, if you have an upcoming event you'd like to feature on the Intrazone, please let us know. We're happy to share the news. And so many of you have. We have lots to get through, so let's get right to it. August 5th in Manchester, UK, the Scottish Summit.
Then, as you turn the corner, August 21st to the 25th, here in Seattle, the area where Chris and I live is 365 EduCon Seattle, and there's also a co-located Power EduCon. A lot of great keynote sessions, and we hope to see you in Seattle.
Starting in September, across the ocean from us, SEF is coming back, a live and hybrid event, SEF 2023. That'll be September 11th to 12th in Stockholm, Sweden.
Then expect, if you are a Power Platform expert, the Microsoft Power Platform Conference, October 3rd through the 5th in Las Vegas.
Something near and dear to my heart, considering I used to live there, Collab Days New England, October 5th, 2023, in the Boston area at the Microsoft offices in Burlington, Massachusetts.
It's always nice to see your hometown bubbling up. Pretty close to Boston, just around the corner, October 30th through November 4th in Chicago, Illinois, is the 365 EduCon Chicago show. Great experience in Seattle. Move it over to Chicago. Great experience in Chicago.
I'm glad to hear that you consider 860 miles really close. I'll keep that in mind the next time I need a ride somewhere.
It's all, once you get beyond the Mississippi, Chris, it's all right next to each other.
Oh, well, the New Englanders' view of the United States, by the way, is that the U.S. is divided into equal halves, east and west, by the Hudson River. And in fact, people are stunned that Pittsburgh is not considered a West Coast city. Anyway, pushing on, heading south of the border, Community Days is coming to Mexico City on November 2nd in Juarez.
Next is one of the big shows for Microsoft, that is Microsoft Ignite. This is from November 14th through the 17th, 2023. And it's a hybrid event in Seattle, Washington, and online, which means on the 14th, there's pre-day labs that are happening. And throughout the rest of the days, certainly there are keynotes and breakout sessions and a lot of things both available on site and online in the digital space so that you can learn from product experts, get world-class training, and explore the latest innovations that will power you and your customers and partners and everybody within reach with the insights and skills to do more with less in this era of AI. That is Microsoft Ignite, November 14th through the 17th, 2023.
Later on in November, we're coming back to the European SharePoint Conference. That's always a great place to gather with several thousands of your closest Microsoft friends. That'll be November 27th through 30th in Amsterdam.
That is Stroopwafel country. And to round out the year, as much as Chris and I know about events, the last one that we have flagged, December 4th through the 6th, is the European Cloud Summit. This is in Wiesbaden, Germany, and I think it's going to round out the year in the most beautiful of ways.
And of course, we're sure there are many more events, and if you would like to add to this growing list, please reach out to us and we'll be sure to spotlight your event on an upcoming podcast.
Thank you to our guest, Sesha Mani, for being on the show and for sharing all the goodness coming for SharePoint admins.
We encourage you to check out our show page for links to everything we talked about today and more. Visit us at aka.ms/theintrozone.
You can send us your questions, your feedback, your love and exclamation for your favorite product. Maybe that's SharePoint, and we will usher that over to the SharePoint teams so they can hear all of your great questions and feedback. And of course, we will answer them. You can always reach us via email at theintrozone@microsoft.com or via Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days, at SharePoint, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000.
Please remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about this show. And follow us wherever you get your favorite tech podcasts.
We thank you for listening. We're your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty, and this has been The Introzone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Sammy Sam Intelligent Intranet.